So good morning. I ran over to the store to grab some stuff for lunch, and I was looking in the deli section because that's my favorite section. I like to look at the variety of cheeses and crackers and like salami things because I am a sucker for cheese, but I also like to try other cheeses, like not just the basic standards, but they are pricier because they're better cheeses, or they're just more to them than just cheddar, So anyways, while I was there was this elderly gal that walked up, and she was very sweet. And she was just like, "Good morning, Brenda," to the the lady who worked the deli, and they were chatting a little bit. And if you go to that Safeway, you'll know that one has a very good customer service. I mean, I've never had a negative in that store. The associates are always really fast to ask if you need any help or whatever. And so I just thought it was so cool that she has developed this relationship with probably plenty of her customers. And I feel like the elderly gal was there because she, like me, does not like the heat. And so they were laughing because she's like, "Wow, you're here early." And she's like, "Yeah, because it's going to be so hot today. And I think today's going to be 101 or at least 100. And so she said, "But good news, is we're going to cool down into the 90s or something." And they were laughing about that because they're like, everywhere else where it's 90, it's like death and fire, right? But for us, it's like a nice cool day. And so I was just really reminded about how the personal touch for people is so vital, and that sometimes, or I don't know, I want to say for me it's going to be sometimes, but there are people who work on dialysis. Typically they're doing the night dialysis, so you have your whole day to do stuff, which would be working, whatever that may be or look like. But there's also people who actually work and do their exchanges in their vehicles on their lunch breaks. That to me is a little wild, but I could see it. Sometimes I feel like I miss going to work just because of the human interaction. And so I was reminded about just the importance of grandparents, because I don't have any. And it's just kind of sad because I think grandparents are that voice outside of your parents, because your parents, regardless at whatever age, are always your parents, right? There's always typically like a lesson to learn, or they do. I feel like parents do evolve to become more listening than judgment, because their responsibility is kind of over. Like, you don't have to bear that responsibility of your children because they're now adults. At least that's how I feel about my kids in a way. But in a lot of ways, I'm still like, no, you don't get to act like that. And no, you don't need to treat your partner that way. And no, you don't get to do that to Charlie or Gus. It's just funny though, because I honestly, they are better parents than I was. And that's what you want. You want every generation to get better and better. But I do miss not having a grandparent to go and sit with, or hear stories from, or experience their life struggles. And I wish I had that. So the little elderly gal was kind of doing that with Brenda at the deli section. And I just was envious, because I'm like, oh, I want that. But then in our situation, being on dialysis, we have to interrupt our lives to do the exchanges. If you're like me, where you do it throughout the day, that does or can become not burdensome, but interruptive. So there are times that you have to say like, okay, I can meet at 9 or 10, or I've had to tell like maintenance, okay, you can come in between 8 and 10, but at 10 o'clock you got to go. Or at least I have to be enclosed into my area. And then from 11 to 1, you can come back in, you know, like those kind of things. And sometimes that can kind of be a drag, but for me, it's not really. But, you know, it's just what I've learned to do it for, 4 years now, 5 years now, something. But anyways, so just because we're on dialysis and just because we're having to tuck back in at times, maybe our dialysis spirit animal is a turtle, because we do have to tuck in and do our thing, right? And then we come back out and we do our thing. But I feel like you still have a voice. We still have a voice. We can still pour out our love onto people. And I know that the last couple of days, I want to say a week, it's been mentally frustrating to me on many levels for many different things. And so I find one of the best things to use is social media, because like right now, while I'm tucked in doing my exchange, I'm able to reach out to people and like their post or encourage their comments, or interact with them to give them motivation or an idea. Like, what if you don't drink that soda today and you just have water, you know? And I try to use humor a lot, because when it comes to food especially, people are just so stubborn and very and it's the addictive personality, because you get addicted to the terrible foods. So, you know, I always tease, and I'll say things like, so before you unfriend me, just know that if you're going to eat that, you might chase it with a Tums, because that tomato is very inflammatory, although I know delicious and it came from your garden. But if you ever have issues, it's because your body is saying we don't like it. And now you can unfriend me, you know. And so, you know, I try to bring in humor a little bit to help with some of the things that I say, but I feel like those kind of conversations really help my spirit to not feel like alone. And then it also helps the other person feel encouraged, or maybe there's a new idea, or just loved, because a lot of times people use social media as their way of looking for love, and not romance love, but just human touch. And that's the part of social media that is really great. You know, you can see pictures from friends from a long time ago. Everybody's graduating right now, so you can be like this morning, there was a friend of mine who I worked with several years ago, like maybe 6-7 years ago, and her daughters graduated high school, and I'm just like, I cannot believe that she was so little when I saw her last, and now she's this grown person. And you know, it's just remarkable, and it's amazing. And I think those are the things that we want to focus on and celebrate. I do know, because I get really frustrated and tired with all the political posts. I mean, like, give it a rest. I tell you what, I personally don't vote. I know, but I just don't ever want to be that person that just absolutely hates another person like that. I mean, there's just so much craziness, and I understand why they might feel hateful, or the experiences that they're having that would cause them to feel hateful. But hate just is so easy to breed hate and harden yourself, and that emotion is so much easier than to be loving, outgoing, happy. And I'm not saying you have to be that all the time, because that's not reality. But the hate, I'm just like, wow, it's insane. It drives me nuts. And a lot of my friends, I've actually had to snooze for 30 days just to see if they can get past all the vomit of who they're for or who they're against. so that my feed, so what I'm ingesting in my social media is going to be goodness and kindness and love and empathy, because those are the things that feed my soul. Like, that's things that will feed anybody's soul. So I don't want to be spewing venom, but I know it can get really frustrating. And I know when you're passionate about something, you do want to stand up for that, or you have to set a boundary, or you have to say no. And that's admirable. But that's just kind of what I do, though, to make sure that my feed and my social media and all my stuff is typically pretty positive. And just being willing to pour that back out to people helps my spirit feel happier, too. So even though I don't have grandpa and grandma anymore, I do remember my own grandparents and just the quality time we spent just talking, or me listening. And what's kind of cool too is that my grandma, again, I'm adopted, so this is my adopted grandma from Bisbee, was actually professionally recorded about her stories of Bisbee during the mining years, because that's when she was there. In fact, she lived where the pit is. I know, everybody touristy people come and they want to see the Bisbee pit. And her house was literally on top of where the pit is. And they moved the houses so they could mine there. And so, just things like that she shared with me is so precious. And I miss her. And I think that if you miss her. And so if you have grandparents still, make sure you call them, write them a letter. They always like that. Give a shout out to them so that they know that they're still important, because just as we're trying to get through our dialysis every day in and out, they're also trying to get up out of the chair and washing their own little dishes and trying to take a shower independently, so they have their struggles too. So anyways, that's all I had today. I just thought it was kind of super cool to see that Brenda from the deli section was being so kind and listening to her customers and the little lady. So, okay, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.